Hey, Mindy, Cassidy, just give me the go ahead when you're ready. Okay, I got a thumbs up, I think. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very special meeting, March 29th, special virtual meeting of the Oregon Water Resources Commission. Uh, we are all virtual here today, so bear with us as we all navigate being virtual again with technology. I appreciate everyone who's been able to make it to this meeting this afternoon. We have a couple of agenda items, one main agenda item. Did I say, what did I say? Did I say March? What did I say, Joe?
You said 29.
Did I? March
Yeah.
19th. Let's get that straight. Today is March
She was gonna
19th.
get
Slow
the math
down,
over
Madam
with
Chair,
quickly.
slow down.
We're not to the end of March yet. Okay, so March 19th, everyone, of this very special our Water Resources Commission meeting, we have a big agenda item A, that we'll get started with, and then following that, we'll have a public comment period. I'll start out with just introducing commissioners, and we'll do introductions, and then we'll get started in the presentation. I'll go ahead and start. My name is Julie Smitherman. I am the commissioner for the Southwest region, and I'll pass it on to Kathy.
Kathy Kahira, Commissioner for the East Side at Large.
That's the baton. I'm Jan Newman, Commissioner for West Side at Large.
I think there you
I'm Jan Lee, I'm Commissioner from the Northwest region from Sandy.
go ahead, Joe.
I'm Joe Mall from West Central. You're up, Woody.
Woody Wolf from the East Region out of Wallowa, Oregon.
Okay.
And welcome, Adele.
Hi, all. I'm Adele Amos. I'm not technically on the commission yet, but
Oh, okay.
was invited to sit in. So I'm here just to listen, I think, and happy to log off if I need to.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jan, for mentioning that Adele was here, and welcome Adele to the meeting. Okay, so I guess we've got a lot to talk about today, so we'll just go ahead and jump in. We first up is agenda item A, water rights, transactions, contested cases, and forfeiture proposed rules.
Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, my name is Raquel Rancier, and I'm one of the deputy directors here at the Oregon Water Resources Department. I'm joined here today with some of our staff, and so I'm going to ask our staff to introduce themselves and also get their voices on the record so folks know who is talking. Laura, can you please go first?
Yes, my name is Laura Hart. I'm a water policy analyst and rules coordinator for this rulemaking.
Thank you, Laura. Let's go to Katie and then Lisa.
Good afternoon, commissioners. For the record, my name is Katie Ratcliffe. I'm the Water Rights Services Division Administrator, and I have to apologize. I'm battling a cold, so if you can't understand what I'm saying at any point today, I'm happy to repeat. And I'll pass it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Katie. For the record, Lisa Jaramillo, manager of the Transfer and Conservation section, and thank you for having me here, commissioners. Good to see you today.
I want to thank a number of our staff who have been sick and have powered through this week. And so appreciate all of you and you being here today. So let's go ahead and get into the presentation here. Laura, I think you are up next, and I think you can go to the next slide. Thank you.
Okay, so just to kind of orient us in the way of background, we've provided the commission with two prior briefings. We had a December briefing That one focused on the broader rulemaking, covering the 18 original divisions. Subsequent to that meeting, we decided to bifurcate the rulemaking effort. And so in February, we came back with what we were calling phase 1 of the rulemaking, which consisted of the 13 of the 18 divisions. And that's what we're going to be talking about with you today. And then the phase 2, we've got that on tap, and we'll be coming back to that hopefully starting next month. So, and the idea of getting it to the commission by June, that's TBD, but that's where we are right now. And then in terms of integrated water resources strategy implementation, just a reminder that these are the 2 action items: strengthening and improving water quantity and water quality permitting programs, and developing additional in-stream protections. So next slide, please. Okay, so you've seen this before, but this is essentially our rule snapshot. You can think about it in terms of our rulemaking need. So we need to clean up the rules, make them more efficient and consistent in order to better serve the public. And there's also a need to modernize and streamline our processes to benefit both staff and the public. And that'll help us clear our backlog and make more timely decisions. As far as the scope of the rulemaking, we focused primarily on implementation of 2025 legislation, so the House Bill 3342 and House Bill 3544 pertaining to water rights transactions and contested case processes, and then some other recent legislation as well. We took the opportunity to make additional process and policy improvements, including revisiting Division 77, which had undergone prior multiple RAC efforts. So we wanted to go back and try and do what we could to finish off some of those earlier efforts. And then also housekeeping items, so the usual spelling, grammar, but also updating our rule numbering, making sure our statutory references are correct, that sort of thing. So next slide. You've seen this before. This is our rulemaking timeline, and the circle is moved further to the right. So here we are now, and just noting again that this was a very ambitious timeline, but we're grateful to all the hard work of the staff. And also I'm noting there are several members of the RAC that have joined us publicly, and we are very appreciative of their expertise and their hard work and just hanging in there and their patience. And we could not have gotten through this without them. So much gratitude to our RAC members as well. Next slide. As far as tribal engagement, we were involved in both informal and formal efforts. So informal would be the staff-to-staff level interactions, including invitations that went out to all 9 federally recognized tribes. We were fortunate to have staff join us from 2 of those tribes. We also provided briefings and consultations upon request. In February, I neglected to mention that we had an additional meeting with the staff with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. They had some questions about some of the changes we proposed in Division 380 that I think Lisa's going to touch on later. And then during the public comment period, we did receive 1 written comment from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. Slide. Okay. This is to orient you. There were a lot of attachments that went out. I think you all did a pretty good job of wading through those based on the questions we received, but just for reference, so our attachment 1, that's the tribal written comment we received. Then we grouped the comments that we received. We had individual comments. And so we got 18 of those, and 12 of those came from RAC members, just to give you an idea of the input that we received from the RAC. We also received a batch of what we're calling group or form emails. Those comments were generated by an action alert, and they pertain to some of the proposed changes that we had offered, and then somewhat scaled back with respect to land use compatibility. And I think Katie's going to touch a little bit more on that momentarily. And then we did have 2 hybrid hearings, one in Salem and one in Bend, and we received 4 comments during the hearing in Bend. And then in addition to just giving you all those comments, we also provided trackers, and those trackers, we build those by going into the comments, pulling out individual comments from the letters. So a lot of these letters made multiple comments about multiple divisions, and we pulled those out. We populated the trackers by division, reviewed the comments, responded to the comments, and then we made a note as to whether the comments resulted in us making changes to the proposed rules relative to what went out during the notice of public comment. In addition to that, we did get some more general comments. So we have a separate tracker that's not division specific, that's more on process and scope. And I'll talk about that in a second. So next slide, and then next slide. Okay. So now we're going to get into the comment review portion. I think it's important. I've got a bunch of notes here, so I probably need to make sure I pay attention to these. Okay, all right. We're not going to go through all the comments we received. We're going to focus. Well, let me step back for a second. So first, I do want to say that we did receive some comments that were supportive of what we had done in terms of various proposed rules. And you'll see those reflected in the tracker. So I wanted to make that note because I think sometimes we tend to focus on, the negative more so than the positive, but there were some comments, several, in support of some of the rule changes. But today what we're going to focus on are the ones that were more contentious, if you will, that required more discussion. Some of those we made changes in response to comments, some of them we didn't. Some of them would result in the staff taking another look at related rules and making staff initiated changes that were tangential to what we got during public comment. When we go through the slides, you'll notice there's blue font and black font. So the blue font is, those are highlighting comments that we received for which we made changes in response to, and then staff will go into more detail about those changes. The black font is to show, maybe it was an important issue, but we didn't necessarily make a change in response to that. And I think that's all I have on that slide.
Or if I might, Commission, I do want to, be clear. We're trying to go through this with, and again, this is Raquel for the record, since you all can't see me, but you can hear my voice all of a sudden. I do want to make sure that we just know that I think if you look at the work that the staff did, we took a lot of time to review every single comment and to respond to every single comment. And the depth of our response is in part because we know this is a lot and we wanted to show our work. We wanted the commission to understand why our response landed where it was. So we tried to do that to the extent we could, while also trying not to write an essay for every single issue, knowing that you all had several weeks to be able to digest all of this information. So the presentation is kind of a similar exercise in that there's a lot of great comments that we received that we're not going to be highlighting today in the interest of time and in the interest of just being able to ensure that we're highlighting some key points, but not exhaustively going through every single point. So I just want to acknowledge that if we don't include it in the presentation, it doesn't mean it wasn't important. It just means that we're trying to condense this. And we know that all of you were doing your due diligence in terms of the staff reports and reviewing the materials. So we greatly appreciate that as well. And greatly appreciate the folks that took the time to submit comments. The other piece I would probably hit on, and I think Laura will hit on probably again, but I just want to note that there are some things, and we talked about this in February, that were great points, but we did not feel comfortable making the changes at this point in time, just given where we were at in the rulemaking process and given either whether it was included in the notice or not included in the notice. Or sometimes it's just we didn't have enough time to really dig in, research, and make sure there was no unintended consequences. So I just want that to be a theme as we go through this, to understand there's a lot of important stuff here. And just because we didn't address it doesn't mean it's not important. So Laura, thank you for letting me interrupt.
No problem. Okay, so this is if you can get rid of that green on there, maybe. But so this slide here, these are the 13 divisions. You'll see Division 300 and 340 are bolded. We're not going to go into details about those two particular divisions. We're happy to answer questions, but Division 300, we received a handful of comments, and they were along the lines of requests to add definitions that were outside the scope of the rulemaking. And Division 340, we didn't get any comments on that one at all. So, and I think we made one minor change to the rule summary, and that's all we did there. So, but we're happy to answer questions on those if we need to. Oops. Okay. Oh.
So we're going to pause. We're having some technical.
You can leave it. It's not showing up virtually. It's just showing up in the room, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Let's
sorry.
leave it.
Sorry. Yeah, just leave it. That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So we did get, as I mentioned earlier, some general comments. We got some comments about the process. So acknowledgement that we were well organized and thorough and responsive, but also there was some comments about the fact that the rulemaking felt a bit rushed and dense. There was a lot of material in a short order for the RAC in particular to digest. So we do recognize that. We also got comments on the scope of the rulemaking. So there were some folks that thought we should really have limited what we were doing to the 2025 legislation and not address other process and policy needs. But as we said at the beginning, these divisions were in sore need of updates. Water rights transactions we're facing massive backlogs that we just need to address. So we wanted to take that opportunity while we had it to make those changes, as well as revisiting Division 77, which had been, on the books for a while. And then in addition, we got some comments about land use. And so I'm going to turn this portion over to Katie to kind of take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Laura. So we received 122 nearly identical comments about land use, and that's what Laura was referring to as the form comments, along with other public comments and RAC member comments about land use. Commenters almost universally urge collaboration between Department of Land Conservation and Development and WRD at the intersection of land use decisions and water use decisions. But where commenters and actually to get into more details, they ask this collaboration include, but not be limited to, taking a close look at the relative sequencing of water right decisions and land use decisions, and evaluating how water right transaction decisions could better align with the goals of the land use system. Where commenters diverge is the timing for making changes based on this collaboration, with some expressing support for and others opposing removal of some of the draft land use language that the department had put in front of the RAC. While the proposed rules maintain some of the changes discussed with the RAC, the department recommends that any broader changes around land use be addressed at a later time that allows for a more comprehensive review. Coordination with DLCD began during the rulemaking, and discussions with the Commission about future changes and updates to the State Agency Coordination Program began at the last Commission meeting, February 2026. We look forward to continuing these discussions. Next slide, please.
Katie, before we move on to the divisions, I do want to make sure we orient the Commission briefly and what our intent is today. We felt like we spent quite a bit of time talking about what the rules do in February. I think it was only 3 hours or maybe 3.5 hours. I don't remember exactly the timing, but we felt like there was a pretty extensive discussion about what the rules do. So we did not spend time regurgitating that information for all of you. And instead today we're hopping to talking a bit about the comments and why we made certain changes or did not. So I hope that's okay with the commission, but I do want to welcome you all. If you have questions about the rules, if you have questions about any of the comments that were submitted that we cover or do not cover, you are welcome to ask questions about any and all of it, and we are happy to answer. Again, we're just trying to be thoughtful with our time today, knowing that you all got to sit through 2 presentations, one in December and in February, that were really just about the rules, and in February, a little bit about the changes that we were making based on feedback as well. So thank you, and we can continue on.
Great, thank you, Raquel. Division 305 is our proposed new division that would establish standardized criteria for maps submitted to the department for water right transactions. In response to a comment stating that technical reporting requirements should not exceed commonly available tools, WRD proposes an adjustment to the proposed rules. We propose to remove the requirement that GPS devices be accurate to within 10 feet, as we understand that for some geographic areas that may not be reasonable. Another comment expressed concern about publicly sharing mapping information provided by applicants, and also requested that waivers from some mapping requirements be considered for smaller businesses. We don't propose to make further adjustments based on these comments. Maps submitted for water right applications have always been considered public records, and many of these are already available online on our water rights mapping tool. The proposed Division 305 rules contain opportunities for some elements of the mapping standards to be waived or modified by the department if requested by the applicant. In preparation for today's meeting, the department realized that we needed to make a slight revision to the Division 305 language. Next slide, please. The rule language was not intended to state that a map scale of 1 inch equals 1,320 feet was not acceptable. In fact, we accept those types of maps all the time. That's pretty common for us. So we wanted to make sure we corrected that. The language was intended to state that 1 inch shall not exceed 1,320 feet, with the exceptions that are provided in the proposed rules. We have proposed the fixes shown on this slide. The proposed revisions will be included in one of the rulemaking decision alternatives for the Commission's consideration. Next slide, please. Division 14 contains our rules pertaining to certified water right examiners, we call them CWEs, and preparation of claims of beneficial use. You might hear the term COBU sometimes. Claims of beneficial use explain how a water right permit or transfer has been developed and request issuance of a water right certificate. A comment on Division 14 requested that we modify the rules so that a claim of beneficial use becomes invalid if the CWE makes a material misstatement of fact. We do not propose changes in response to this comment. If a CWE makes a material misstatement of fact in a claim of beneficial use, our existing Division 14 rules allow us to refer the matter to the CWE licensing authority. Next slide. Thank you. Division 310 contains the rules for new water right applications undergoing the standard review process. The existing new water right application process allows for administrative holds, and if those are granted, they prevent the department from issuing a proposed final order during the period of the hold. The proposed rules provide circumstances and maximum timelines for which a hold may be considered reasonable and necessary. And reasonable and necessary is a term used in statute, and it's a term used in the existing rules, but it's not defined. We received comments on what the proposed rules consider reasonable and necessary. One of the circumstances is when an applicant needs time to exhaust the administrative appeal process for a land use approval. This can occur when a city or a county's land use approval has been appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, and it may include additional steps such as LUBA sending the case back to the local government for more work. WRD had proposed a maximum administrative hold of 1 year under these circumstances. Based on comments expressing that this period was too short and a specific request that we change this to 2 years, the department now proposes that the timeline for this administrative hold category be a maximum of 2 years instead of 1 year. Another comment stated that one of the administrative hold categories was too long. It provides applicants a maximum of 7 years to collect data on groundwater levels under certain circumstances. We don't propose any changes in response to this comment. In some cases, applicants may need to collect 5 years of data and also may need time to engage a well driller. Division 315 contains our rules applicable to extending permit development timelines. So you're going to hear a 2026 update based on this legislative session. So as discussed in previous presentations, legislation in 2025 limited the number and length of extensions. House Bill 4004 from the 2026 legislative session created an additional extension pathway for certain permits. The new legislation will take effect this June if it's signed by the governor. To ensure that the proposed rules do not end up conflicting with the upcoming statutory changes, while also staying within the limits of the rulemaking notice, the department modified the proposed rules to refer back to the extension statutes. These are the existing applicable statutes and also where the upcoming statutory changes will be located if the bill is signed by the governor. Even if the 2026 legislation is signed by the governor, permits other than municipal and quasi-municipal, such as irrigation, will still have limited extended development windows. If a permit's eligible and the permit holder uses the pathways available under both the 2025 and 2026 legislation, they may qualify for a maximum cumulative extended development time of between 7 and 9 years. In contrast, right now, sometimes folks ask for an extensions or cumulative extensions that last decades. Regardless of what happens with the 2026 legislation, per the 2025 legislation, quasi-municipal and group domestic permits will be eligible for up to 1 extension for a maximum of 20 years and 10 years respectively. Because of new limitations on the number and length of extensions, and because the longer development windows are for quasi-municipal permits that already require reporting via other regulatory requirements, the proposed rules would remove checkpoint conditions. These conditions currently apply to extensions exceeding 5 years and require the permit holder to update the department on how development under their water use permit is progressing. While the rules would no longer explicitly require checkpoint conditions, in response to the comments, we propose to keep language that maintains the department's authority to condition an extension order to periodically document the continued need for the permit. Division 77 contains our rules for in-stream water right applications. With some exceptions, existing Division 77 rules limit the amount of water that may be allocated to in-stream water rights to the estimated average natural flow. You'll hear us refer to that as EANF, or more commonly ENAF, even though it kind of moves the, the letters out of order. Loosely speaking, ENAF considers what the average stream flow would be absent consumptive water uses. Some comments ask that ENAF restrictions be removed for state agency in-stream water right applications on the basis that they believe that the rules conflict with statute. However, statute does provide the department authority to make the final determination on the level of in-stream flow necessary to protect the public uses identified in the state agency in-stream water right application. And that's the basis for the limitation. Because we did not identify a similar statutory basis for the ENAF limitation on the amount of water that can be converted by in-stream transfers, in-stream leases, or allocations of conserved water, the proposed rules would remove the ENAF limitation for those transactions. We received comments in support of that change. A previous draft of the rules would have required ODFW to send notification of special districts prior to filing an in-stream water right application. In response to RAC feedback and careful consideration, we removed this requirement from the proposed rules. We received some comments supporting the removal and some comments opposing removal. Creating a new pre-application notification requirement could lead to folks submitting an application ahead of the anticipated ODFW application in order to get a priority date that is senior to the in-stream water right, thereby raising questions and concerns about impacts to the priority date system. Therefore, we do not propose to add back in the pre-application special districts notification. However, ODFW's current practice is to provide that notification, and nothing in our rules prohibit them from continuing to do so. One comment opposed an existing rule requiring that state agency in-stream water right applicants provide pre-application notification to local governments. However, that rule is part of WRD's compliance with its state agency coordination program for land use compatibility. This topic should be addressed as part of discussions outside this rulemaking about updates to the agency's state agency coordination program. The proposed Division 77 rules specify that WRD may only issue in-stream water rights, in-stream leases, and in-stream transfers within the state of Oregon's boundaries. Comments express concern that this would interfere with cooperation between states to protect water across state lines. The department does not propose further rule changes in response to these comments because Oregon does not have jurisdiction outside of its state boundaries. However, the rules do not restrict what other states, such as Washington State, protect within their state boundaries. We received comments about including or not including a definition of living certificate. Lisa will discuss this in the context of Division 18. For all transfers, including in-stream transfers, WRD evaluates the request to determine if there would be injury or enlargement. Commenters express concern that the department's evaluation appears more detailed in Division 77 for in-stream transfers than it does in Division 380 for other types of transfers. The Division 77 rules articulate in more detail how the department does this analysis. However, the analysis is the same for both Division 77 and Division 380. While adding more detail to Division 380 may be helpful, we are concerned that this may be outside the scope that was noticed for Division 380, as it adds review criteria to the rule that was not included in the notice. So we therefore do not propose to make any changes in response to that comment. Finally, for Division 77 rules describe the process for converting minimum perennial stream flows to in-stream water rights. Comments express that the proposed rules may not be consistent with statute. WRD believes that the proposed rules reflect a statutory requirement that the department issue a proposed final order during the conversion process. In accordance with statute, the PFO may approve for a lesser amount, or reject the requested in-stream amount. Because the proposed rules are consistent with statute, the department does not propose further changes based on these comments. Turning the presentation over now to Lisa Jaramillo.
Thank you, Katie. All right, shifting gears. Division 325 rules provide the process to split a single permit into more than one permit. An example of this is when a water right permit was issued for a place of use on a property owned by a single landowner, and then the property was subsequently divided and portions sold to new individuals. The proposed rules explain that the split a permit process is only available if the time specified in the permit or in any last approved extension of time request to perfect the water right is not expired. The split a permit process cannot be used to extend a permit. The commenter requests to amend the rule so that it only allows original permits, not extended permits, to be split. The statute states that a permit must have a subsequent completion date, and we do not see any reason to limit permits that have been extended, as long as their completion date is unexpired when they apply for a split a permit. WRD staff did make a change to make it clear that we will not accept applications if the completion date is expired. Okay, catching up. Sorry about that. Division 18. So living certificates apply specifically to irrigation district transfers and certificates under ORS 540.530 Section 2A. It is a process where WRD can hold off on issuance of a new certificate for a district. WRD usually waits until it has a number of transactions to incorporate before updating one of these district certificates. This is because there can be many changes and many acres of land associated with those transactions, and it takes a lot of work to reconcile all the changes and update irrigation district certificates. WRD does have authority to use this process for Division 380 and Division 77, and will continue to use it for those rule divisions. However, we do not have the authority to utilize this statutory provision for Division 18. OWRD staff are quite concerned about needing to immediately issue certificates for districts. Therefore, changes made to Division 18 to give WRD a little bit more time were made to issue the district certificate instead of immediately upon issuance of the order. So we made changes to give ourselves a little more flexibility there. Though not the same as a living certificate, it will provide us this flexibility and timing that we need. During the RAC process, OWRD's aim was to be more transparent about the fact that allocations of conserved water do allow groundwater rights to be processed through the program. OWRD provided a more extensive response in the staff report on this matter. Given the concerns raised during the RAC, OWRD sought to point to statute instead of providing a more explicit process in rule to allow for more discussion with interested parties. OWRD wants to be clear that the rules still allow for groundwater allocation of conserved water changes. They just don't provide explicit details about that. OWRD also wanted to make sure that the Division 18 rules recite the statute as it relates to the distribution of conserved water. So the rules were changed to include full statutory provisions which state that the portion of the conserved water allocated to the state will be converted to an in-stream water right if needed for in-stream flow purposes. Otherwise, if it's not needed for in-stream flow, that part of the conserved water will revert to the public for appropriation by the next user in priority. Next slide, please. The next item under Division 380 water right transfers is one that is of ongoing concern to the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. And a number of other conservation groups expressed the same request. The requests are to change the definition of enlargement because of a desire to be able to transfer the full amount of water in stream. The primary concern driving this is that OWRD requires the lands being transferred to be dried up, and we don't allow lands that are sub-irrigated to be transferred because those sub-irrigated lands cannot be dried up. So for instance, if you have a natural wetland area that can't be dried up, we would not allow that to be included in the transfer. Allowing that would result in more water being able to be used at the new place of use, be that for in-stream purposes or for an out-of-stream use, such as moving the lands that are unable to be dried up because of natural wetland conditions to new lands that are completely dry, thereby expanding the right. OWRD would like to explore if there are other options for addressing the tribe's concerns after completion of the rulemaking. The second item relates to consistency between the Division 380 and Division 77 injury and enlargement analysis, which was already addressed during the discussion on Division 77. And there was a request to include the new statute that allows OWRD to deny certain applications for groundwater point of appropriation, transfers, permit amendments, or groundwater registration modifications. OWRD is including text that essentially says the department may deny a change in the point of appropriation pursuant to X, fill in the correct statute depending on the type of the application. This law allows the department to deny a groundwater point of appropriation transfer into a critical groundwater area, restrictively classified area, or a withdrawn area. The rule text just points to statute. It does not provide further interpretation given the scope of this rulemaking. Next slide, please. A substitution occurs when a water right holder has both a primary surface water right and a supplemental groundwater right, and goes through a process to substitute use of the supplemental water right for the primary water right. The proposed rules include the department's existing policy and practice of not allowing certain transfers to occur prior to termination of the substitution and approval of a new transfer application. A comment asserted that this goes beyond the statutory intent. The department carefully reviewed the applicable statutes again and believe the rules are consistent with statute, and therefore we do not propose further changes. There were various comments submitted pertaining to the consent to injury process for transfers. One comment was that consent to injury is limited to surface water point of diversion changes. OWRD did not make a change to that effect, as the statute applies to both surface water and groundwater. However, that same commenter is correct that statute limits the use of this mechanism to point of appropriation and point of diversion changes, not type of use or place of use changes. So WRD made appropriate updates to clarify that aspect. The commenter also made suggestions related to consent to injury not being required. OWRD agrees, and we did make changes to clarify that the state agency that requested the in-stream water right can recommend that OWRD either consent or not consent to the injury. Finally, as it pertains to the requirements an applicant must meet to request consent to injury, OWRD staff identified that not all requirements were identified by the rules, so we made changes to clearly identify all requirements of the applicant. Next slide, please. The applicability of other laws and rules as it relates to the criteria for evaluating a transfer application was a matter that was important to many members of the RAC with different perspectives. During the RAC meeting we had on Division 380, one group felt that the existing rule language, which states that, quote, any other requirements for water right transfers are met, was too broad and suggested the rule be changed to, quote, any other requirements specified under Division 380. Conversely, others felt that the existing language was too narrow and that it should be expanded to state, again, quote, any other requirements of law and rule are met. Similar comments were received during the public comment period on the proposed rules. OWRD believes that the proposed language as drafted, which states any other requirements applicable to water right transfers are met, best addresses these diverse viewpoints and does not confine statute. Related to forfeiture, one comment opposed the department initiating cancellation proceedings if a protest of a proposed final order approving a transfer asserts that the water right being transferred is subject to forfeiture due to non-use. When OWRD evaluates a transfer, one of the approval criteria is that the right has been used over the past 5 years according to the terms and conditions of the right, and that the right is not subject to forfeiture. If assertions of non-use and forfeiture are made against a water right involved in a transfer application, OWRD must first deal with the forfeiture issue before it can continue processing the transfer application, or else the administrative law judge will have to address it as part of the hearing. The department is attempting to harmonize the laws, though we recognize it is challenging. Next slide, please. In preparation for today's meeting, the department identified that we needed to make a slight revision to Division 380 language. The rule language in -4000 Section 3D for initial reviews was not intended to state, quote, the water user is ready, willing, and able to use the full amount of the right. Instead, similar to the changes already made in the proposed language in -4010 Section 2 for proposed final orders, and in -5000 Section 1D for final orders, it should state the water user is ready, willing, and able to use the portion of the right to be transferred. We've proposed the fixes shown on this slide, and the proposed revision will be included in one of the rulemaking decision alternatives for the Commission's consideration. Next slide, please. Division 382 outlines the requirements for making modifications to an unadjudicated groundwater registration claim. Pertaining to evidence of use, we received a comment that the application should provide proof of use over the past 5 years under the groundwater registration. The commenter also noted that the surface water registration rules do this. OWRD did not make this change because the forfeiture statute does not apply to registrations. Also, further review would be needed as it pertains to the surface water registration rules, which are not part of this rulemaking. In response to comments for groundwater point of appropriation changes under Division 382, we included reference to new statute that states OWRD may deny a groundwater point of appropriation change under certain circumstances. This was previously discussed as part of Division 380. And we also previously addressed the applicability of other laws and rules as part of the Division 380 discussion. So OWRD believes the proposed rule language as drafted best addresses the diverse viewpoints of the RAC and does not confine the statute. And with that, I will hand things over to Raquel Rancière.
Okay, good afternoon again, Commissioners. We're now moving into Division 17, which is the division that addresses cancellation of perfected water rights. We spent quite a bit of time talking about this division and some of the comments we received, as well as Division 2, which are the two that I'll be talking about today during our February meeting. So at a high level, I'll touch on a couple of these points, reiterating some of the things you may have already heard in February. So we did receive some comments that expressed concerns about the accuracy of aerial imagery, and as well as the use of evapotranspiration data is part of assertion of non-use. And OWRD did add those as potential sources of evidence for assertions of non-use. But we are aware of the accuracy of those tools and collectively, all of our evidence must meet the standard of proof for cancellation. And that standard of proof is a preponderance of evidence. And so the requirements do not change the standards. From our perspective, we want to continue to include these in there to be transparent about the types of evidence that may be included. As a reminder, the current rules already say including but not limited to. So we're just being more transparent about what could be used in those instances, not changing the standard of proof though. The second item was a concern that the rules limited the types of evidence that could be submitted or how evidence could be submitted from the public to the department about assertions of non-use. And we initially had included in the rules basically that you could submit the affidavit, or if you didn't submit an affidavit, that it would be just another source of information that the department could consider. Given the concerns raised, and it also ties into the next one, we did change that back. So affidavit is not required. It is one of the options in order to submit evidence to the department. This does tie into the next one, which was where the commenter had expressed concerns about the affidavit option being the only request for evidence in there was that the person swear that they know no water was used. And there is other types of forfeiture scenarios beyond that. That's the most common one that we see. Given the importance of this issue, though, it is a change that we do think probably needs to be evaluated in future rulemaking. But because it wasn't talked about with the RAC and it wasn't included in the rulemaking notice, and we know that the forfeiture rules are of high concern to some folks, we were hesitant to make the change at this time. So when you pair that with the change that we made that I just discussed, where we're not limiting the affidavits to be the only way to submit evidence, folks, the rules don't limit folks from submitting evidence for other types. So that is how we addressed that particular issue. And this was something we'd also mentioned in February. The other piece was there was some concerns about the procedural defaults that are incorporated primarily as a result of these new laws. And I think one of those defaults is final order will become final, or proposed final order will become final within 33 days if we don't receive a protest. So that's one example of some of the procedural defaults. You must protest within a certain amount of time. I'll note the protest deadlines have existed even prior to this legislation and this rulemaking. But I think that's what the commenter was getting at. And so we did try to clarify and provide a little bit of assurance in two ways. The first was that we made it clear that in the rules that the department can request more information prior to going to a hearing. So we can request more information from, in this case, it would be the protestant, so the person that's holding the water right, if we need more information to understand whether or not that water right has been forfeited. Again, just thinking about how there was concerns around the procedural defaults. The other piece was just, it's already law, but just putting that so it's clear that the department may reconsider or withdraw a proposed final order within 33 days. So that is already the standard, but just to provide that assurance, knowing that cancellation proceedings are of particular concern to folks. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this next one was one that the commission weighed in on in February. We had quite an extensive conversation on this particular matter. And part of that, so this was the piece around the department adding in the rule that the department would consider the I'm going to hold because, okay. You're doing some technical issues here in the room. So this was the item where the department had proposed in the rules that the director would consider exceptions and issue the final order. And we queued this one up to make sure that that was what the commission actually wanted to delegate, because this was a new delegation. And some of the questions that we heard from the commission, if I'm recapping what I took away from that conversation, was that the commission does want to be able to be involved in forfeiture proceedings. At the same time, the commission also, if the number of proceedings increase, there's a concern there about the number that could end up going to the commission. And so we talked a little bit more about it. There was also a question around, is there more legal risk if this is done via delegation order versus doing it in a rule, and some of the pros and cons around doing it in a rule versus delegating it via an order. And so there is not a difference in legal risk from our perspective on whether you delegate via rule or versus order. If you do it via rule, though, you would need to, let's say you wanted to take that back, or you wanted to take it back for particular issues, there is less ability to maneuver in that situation because it's already in the rule. And so you would need to do another rulemaking. So the department has, since we removed the rule in the draft that you all received, because then you can do a delegation order and outline the scenarios in which you all may want to retain authority, and also not have to then go through a rulemaking. So, and should you decide, nope, we really want this authority back, it's as simple as rescinding that delegation order. So we felt like that actually accomplished your goals better than doing it in rule, because you can delegate it to the director, and then, you know, should there be things that are of concern, you can always make modifications there. So we do intend, we have this queued up where we've been talking about how to draft up such an order, not for obviously today's meeting, but for a future meeting in 2026. So you all could take a look at this issue while it's fresh in your memory. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, we are now on Division 2. So we talked a little bit about this in February as well, and some of the comments expressed concerns around, they were particularly around the default hearing schedule and how the schedule outlined specific timelines around the issues list, motions to compel, and motions for summary determination. And then there was also comments that expressed concerns about limits on admissions, interrogatories, site visits, and productions of documents. And so in looking at this, the reason we're proposing these changes is really being driven by the fact that we think both the default hearing schedule as well as the discovery limits will make the hearing process more efficient, and while also preserving the opportunity for a full and fair hearing. And for us, it's important to recognize, one, that there's expectations that OWRD will reduce our processing timelines and reduce the protest backlog. And we also think that it is part of due process is having a timely hearing. And so the backlogs in themselves are denying people their right to be able to get through this process, right? So these changes, we think, will help us move through the number of protests more timely while still providing a fair hearing. And currently, in regards to water rights, we do think that one of the biggest procedural barriers to protests being heard is just the amount of time and resources each individual hearing is consuming. So we continue to maintain that we think this is the best pathway forward. That said, you'll see there's bullet number 3, the staff proposed change. This is from my standpoint. I think that part of our proposals around discovery and the default schedule, and remember the default schedule only applies to a portion of the contested cases, those that were covered by legislation, whereas our proposals around discovery would apply to all of the rules, or all of the types of contested cases that are covered by these rules. And yet our rule that was around providing the agency file up front was only applicable to those cases that were covered by legislation. That was in the notice of proposed rulemaking. From my standpoint, the whole reason for some of the discovery, not the whole reason, part of the reason for discovery limits and them being fair is that we are providing our file up front. And so from my standpoint, it's very important that that rule applies to any case that the discovery rule applies to. And so that's why that change was included, is because the idea is that we're providing a lot of the information up front, so you don't have to request it through discovery. And so if we're only doing that on a portion of the cases, or not required to do it on all the cases this applies to, I don't think that's fair. So that is why you'll see in the proposed rules that particular change, which makes it so that the agency file is provided upfront for all those cases that the discovery limits applies to. So with that, I think that wraps up just an overview of the various comments and some of the actions the agency took. As you can tell, there's a lot here, and I just want to express my appreciation before I hand this back to Laura for all the work that staff has done. Lisa and Katie and Laura have worked many hours on this, as have some of their staff. Jesse Ratcliffe, who may or may not be on the line, has also provided extensive oversight and answers to many of our questions. So I want to appreciate our partnership with the Department of Justice, as well as some of the other state agencies. There's just a lot here. I think Will Davidson may also be on here, and I don't know how many times I asked him, what is an interrogatory? What is a request for admission? And I still can't retain that very well. So I appreciate him letting me ask the same question over and over again. So with that, we are going to transition into 2 pieces here. One is we're going to summarize those changes again for you that staff identified between the time you received all these staff reports and today's presentation. So we will recap those 2 items, and then we'll go into what we would recommend from the director in terms of the commission's action, and turn it back to you all for discussion and go forward from there. Laura, please take us away.
Next slide, probably the slide after. So this is a reminder about the Division 305, the general map criteria correction that Katie explained earlier. We're just looking to replace the be equal to or greater than language with exceed in both A and C. And then if we can go to the next slide. Next slide. Yep, thank you. That's good. And then here's a reminder about the Division 380 issue that Lisa went over, looking to replace the full amount of water allowed under with portion of, and adding to be transferred. So if we could go to the next slide, and then the next slide. So here are the alternatives, and I'm just going to read them straight into the record. So the commission may consider the following alternatives. Number 1, adopt final proposed rules in attachment 6A and 6B. So those are those attachments that are part of the staff report. Number 2, adopt final proposed rules as modified by the commission. And number 3, do not adopt final proposed rules and request the department to further evaluate the issues. Director Gall just stepped out, recommends alternative 2, adopt final proposed rules as modified by the commission. And I think we go to the next slide. This is an example. We went ahead and put together some language in the event that you choose to adopt the second alternative, which references the proposed rules in attachment 6A, as well as the corrections, the modifications that we just presented. And then go to the next slide. Okay, and so this is where we pause and turn it back over to the chair to see if there's questions or more discussion and so forth.
Wow, thank you so much to all of you for your presentation, and echoing Raquel saying how much time staff has put into this. We can tell. It was easy enough to follow in the format that you provided to us. So we really appreciate all the work that went into gathering all of this data and making it into a way that we could fully understand. Do we have any? I'll open it up for questions and comments from other commissioners. Do we have any questions for staff?
Commissioner Smitherman, would it help you if we stop screen sharing temporarily so you can see folks?
That might be helpful, yes, so I
Okay.
don't have to click
Great.
through. Okay, I do see that we have Commissioner Lee has her hand up. So Commissioner Lee, when you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, there were a lot of comments about land use, and I concur that we shouldn't currently make the change. But I will say that in looking at the Deschutes Basin as an example, that the county has done a lot of what you call spot zoning over the years instead of using the comprehensive plan to appropriately update by sections. And even now we're seeing in the legislature any number of bills that are looking at changing the urban growth, excuse me so much, changing the urban growth boundaries by statute and not following the land use laws. This session, there was one bill that was going to convert 1,700 acres of agriculture farmland to industrial outside the statute. So I look forward to working with LCDC for us to get our coordination plan in place and turn some of that around. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. I agree with you on the further collaboration that we will have with the LCDC and appreciate the meeting that we had with them in February. Next up, we have Commissioner Wolf, I think, had his hand up first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this was a lot of work, a lot of material. Thank you for the department for organizing it in a manner that was actually tackleable. I did have some clarification questions on why the definition of enlargement was recommended to remain the same. There was quite a bit of concern in the comments, the public comments about it. And just as somebody who uses water and has used it in multiple capacities for my living, as most of the true value derived on my balance sheet, I have a few questions. If water cannot be dried up on a piece of property that has water right, then the water right can't be transferred in stream and protected. I don't understand why that is. The water is measured and allocated at the point of diversion. Any water that does not dry up is either a separate source or the same source from a separate location, or should be allocated as losses due to infrastructure to facilitate the other water rights still on that conveyance system, and could be either potentially solved by fixing infrastructure or the water that is creating that sub green up is not from the same source. And if you can divert a water right by volume and duty in its entirety from a point of diversion, why can't, and that point of diversion should be right next to the place that it would be protected in stream, then I'm trying to understand why that it can't be protected in its entirety in stream at the point of diversion.
One.
So that was what I wrote down while they were going through the Division 380 explanation. And I had those questions, and if anybody needs clarification, I'm happy to try.
Commissioner Wolf and commissioners, this has been a topic that is, from our standpoint, highly complicated. So complicated that I will start, and then Lisa can say, no, Raquel, you got that wrong. So we'll see if I can get us there. And it's one of those topics where I do think it requires more time. And so I will start with that for us to discuss, because the level of complexity, the more we talk about this, it's evident to me that it's not a simple fix. And so some of the things, when I was listening to your question, Commissioner, is there's an assumption that potentially that individual was diverting the full amount, right? And that may or may not be the case. And let's go with the assumption that they weren't in that instance, because remember, beneficial use without waste, right? So let's go under the assumption that they weren't. That might not be the case all the time, but this is why I'm just going to say, I think we need to take more time to look at this issue, and the department has committed to taking more time to look at this issue. So I want to acknowledge that. We already have a meeting scheduled for the early April. And so to talk about this internally and get some folks together to discuss it more. We did talk about it after we met with tribal staff in early February, and based on all the comments that we received. And so with that, if we do imagine, let's imagine the scenario that they weren't diverting the full amount because that was already a sub-irrigated area, then you go and take that water right. And it's really easy to talk about, well, there is no impact if it's just to in stream, which may or may not be the case as well. But let's go ahead and assume that it is to out of stream. So you're going to put it on another piece of land, and that land is sagebrush and dry. How's that? So you're taking that water right from an area that is a wetland, and you're putting it up on top of a hill that is clearly not sub-irrigated. Well, to irrigate the same amount of acreage, you're going to use more water, because that wetland never needed the water in the first place. And so that's where we're saying, oh, that's an expansion. And so that is the example that I think just shows that there's some complexity here that we need to talk about more. I understand. Yeah.
Is there no burden of proof of historical use, as far as if a portion of your water right is paper versus actually being demonstrated?
So
in the process?
Commissioner, I can have Lisa talk about evidence of use, but if we keep going down this rabbit hole, I can then say, well, okay, so let's say, and this is a scenario that Lisa and I haven't even had a chance to talk about, but as I think about this issue and talk about it, I'm like, okay, but we always subtract the return flows anyways. So even if we address this particular issue in the way that it was requested, would you still get to an outcome where you're successful? Because we would still subtract return flows. And so that's one example. So again, this is why I think this requires more conversation outside of this particular rulemaking.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Is it the department's intent, maybe not here, but in future meetings, to get to a point where it's allowed to be able to protect water in stream that is currently being used for beneficial use and get it right? Is that what I'm hearing?
So our intent is to look at this issue in more detail. Like I said, we do have a meeting scheduled with our staff. From there, we will do some follow-up with the proponents that are interested. I can't commit to what the outcome will be, right? So I don't want to say, yes, everybody will get exactly what they want from this.
The intent of the outcome, not that you'll get there.
but my commitment today is we will look at this and we will have the conversations with the folks that were interested to explain, what our concerns are, and maybe we address our concerns, maybe we don't. That's the question at hand. But we do have a process, so we are committing to make sure that we do additional work on this issue. I can't guarantee what that outcome may be. It may be that we come to an understanding of, oh, this is what the concern is, and that's a valid concern. It may, and so there's no change. It could be that we determine that it's an internal procedural consistency issue that we can fix without any further work. It could be that we decide we need to do rules, and we then talk about doing that. So at this point, I can't guarantee what the outcome is, but I can guarantee that we are committed to providing a process and to discussing it further. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Sounds like further
This is an
conversation.
important issue.
Yes, further conversations we will be having on this issue. So next we have Commissioner Newman.
Thank you. I guess what I'll do is just comment on the two things that Commissioner Lee and Commissioner Wolf have brought up so far. And then maybe if other people want to comment on those same issues, we can do that, because I have some comments on some of the other rules as well. But let me first say, like everybody else has, staff did a great job. I mean, there's a huge amount of work. I really, really appreciate the tracker documents that you provide that summarize in detail the comments and then give your specific responses and whether or not a change was made. That makes this whole process doable. So I really appreciate that. I also want to just say to the commenters and RAC members who may be online, the specific ties to the specific rule provisions that are provided in the comments are also incredibly helpful. So we can look at the tracker and the summary, we can look back at the individual comments and find the details or the depth of the comments on the specific rules. So, and I realize that's a lot of work for everybody, commenters and staff. So I appreciate that. And I think we've gotten pretty close on most of this. I do have a couple of concerns, but as to just what Jan Lee said and Woody said, the land use issue, I mean, we talked about this in February. The sequencing issue is key. We've got to figure that out going forward. Does Water Resources say you can't get a water right or a transaction approved until you have all of your land use final decisions, or does it go the other way? And the way it is now, the public uses the fact that there is no sequencing to drive a wedge between the two agencies. So we do need to cover that. I think it was appropriate to pull it out of this rulemaking, despite all the comments that we got asking to keep it in there. And I hope that the 2-year provision for the land use process to play out that we did put in some of the rules, I mean, that was suggested by some of the municipalities. So I'm hoping that that's enough to cover some of those issues. As to Woody's comment, I mean, this is an issue, but it's an issue that precise measurement of water use would help with. And, we have this history in the state of being a paper transfer state. So you start out with your paper water right when you come in for transfer, and this is what I get to transfer, the whole amount. And so you don't look at historical use so much as Woody was asking, as other states do. Colorado, ratchets it down so that you only get to transfer what you've historically consumptively used. We haven't done that. We do try to account for return flows, but again, it's if you don't measure everything, you can't necessarily tell who's using what, where it's going, and where the return flows are coming. So, but I do appreciate the comments from the tribes and DRC and others that you may be losing something here. I mean, if you can prove as a transferor that you are using your full paper right, obviously with no return flow issues, then maybe you should be able to transfer the whole thing. If you would think that you wouldn't be applying as much water in a place that also gets sub-irrigation, but we know that that's probably not the case because many irrigators don't have that much control over, I mean, it's flood or at least uniform treatment. And so I definitely get the problem that if you pick all of that up and move it, especially to another irrigation use on dry land with no sub-irrigation, you have created an enlargement. But it does seem like the sub-irrigation, if we could identify where that's really happening and if it has reduced the amount of applied irrigation water appropriately, then we have a specific number available for transfer. We're not there yet. So, and I think Raquel's right. I don't think the suggested language of just adding, under the specific water right to those rule provisions takes care of the problem. So, I'm glad that Water Resources is committed to taking care of it. So that's all I have on those two things. I have several comments on Division 2 and a few on 380, 77, and 18, I guess, and 310. But I wanted to wait and see if other people want to talk about those two things.
I do have a question to add on to, and I also appreciate the extension to the 2 years for the administrative process. Does that there are exceptions though, if I'm understanding. There could be further exceptions that would allow that to extend past the 2 years based on the director's assessment of the situation. Am I understanding that correctly?
Vice Chair Smitherman, thank you for the question. For the record, Katie Ratcliffe again. So if someone is past the time allotted to them under the administrative hold, we don't necessarily have to put their application to the top of the pile. So practically speaking, if the staff know that there's a high likelihood that folks are going to be able to resolve the challenge with the application, and it's not going to take too long to do it, right? We don't want things sitting for an unreasonable period of time due to the priority date system. Then, they've got plenty of other applications to work on. So they may say, okay, I'm going to come back to this one in 30 days. It's not a formal process. It's not official, but from communication, if we have good communication from applicants or their CWE or their attorney, sometimes we know maybe they're just getting to the end of their admin hold period, but maybe they'll have it resolved in 30 days. And so staff will say, okay, I've got other ones that are ready to move. I may just not move this one right now and give them that period of time.
Okay. Yeah, because and I appreciate the extension of that to the 2 years, but I also know that other things can happen. And so just knowing that you are able and willing to work with an applicant given unforeseen circumstances in that way. And also the whole purpose is to keep things moving forward, right? We don't want a lot of things sitting out there. We need to streamline it and be more efficient. So I do understand it from that perspective as well. But I thought, it was a good comment that was made and also a good response from the department to meet in the middle on that issue. So that was all my comments on that one.
Commissioner Smitherman, may I? So just two things on the administrative holds issue. I think that just to be clear, the way the rule is written, if I'm remembering, so Katie, I know you spent the time on this, so let me know if I'm misremembering, is that it's very explicit about the types of administrative holds you can request and for how long. And so there is not a catch-all, and you can request a hold for fill in the blank, whatever reason you would like for whatever amount of time you would like. There is nothing like that in there. There's nothing in there. So really what Katie is touching on is that it's not that they can ask for another administrative hold. It's that they can, at that point, it's more on the department's discretion to say, we're going to hold off because it seems like you have a good reason. So just wanted to be clear on that part. And then going back to just the sub-irrigation issue, because I do hear there's other rule divisions we want to get to. It would be great if there was any other questions, if we can talk about those now, because this is really an important issue, as you can tell from the various comments that we received. And I appreciate Commissioner Wolf bringing it up. I also want to acknowledge that I'm not sure if we gave Lisa the opportunity to answer Commissioner Wolf's questions, or if I kind of answered them, because I don't want to just shut the door on that. So I did want to check back with Commissioner Wolf to see if there was other questions, if any of those questions we should be following up on that he started to ask there.
Yes, first, thank you, Raquel, for that clarification on the administrative holds. I do understand it that way as it was presented, and so, but thank you for the clarification for whoever else is listening. Okay, so go, Woody, if you, Commissioner Wolf, if you wanted to respond, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess it really boils down to my experience is a limited scope, and the state has to cover all circumstances and all bases for the entire state. I guess as far as a follow-up, I would just like a communication back on what the department intends to move forward, how they intend to move forward, and the process, and then and maybe I can have some input on that, or maybe not.
Commissioner, we're happy to follow up with you on that and include you in further conversations. And that's really what it comes down to. You're touching on it. It's, we're looking at all of the scenarios. The enlargement definition applies to all scenarios, not just one, limited circumstance. It applies to in-stream and out-of-stream transfers. And so we want to make sure we're looking at it holistically and that there's not unintended consequences. And given, the scope and breadth of this rulemaking, we only had so much time to dedicate to each particular topic. So this one started to exceed that amount of time.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can go back. No other commissioners want to chime in. We can go back to Commissioner Newman and go through some of the other topics that you wanted to bring up.
Thank you. As long as we've been talking about transfers, let's focus on that one first. I just wanted to make sure I understand. I believe you said today that in response to the, or maybe it was on the tracker, that in response to the consent to injury analysis that, and maybe this might have been involved in some of the other rules too. I think you said that Water Resources by statute has the final decision of consenting to injury. And can you cite us to that? Because I guess I didn't realize that. I thought that if ODFW had applied for an in-stream right and they didn't consent to injury, that you had to take their recommendation. But it sounds like that's not the case.
Commissioner Newman, we are the holder of the water right, not ODFW. And I think that's part of it. I can see Lisa's moving on the screen, so I'm buying her a little bit of time. But because we are, I think my understanding of it is because it's us that's the holder of the water right, not those state agencies, that we are the final decision maker in that as a holder. And but of course, because they were the ones that applied for it, we seek their input on that. And so, Lisa, do you have more specifics, or did I nail it today?
Yeah. Thank you, Raquel. Commissioner Newman, commissioners. So our consent to injury process on transfers is found in ORS 540.530. And I'm racing to find exactly where we take the recommendation of the state agency that requested the in-stream water right, but we do have the choice to consent or not consent. And let's see if I can get you exact citation here.
That's okay. I mean, if that gets me in the ballpark.
Okay.
But I just wanted to clarify that that was the position of the agency and that it's based on both the statute and the fact that you are the technical water rights holder. I mean, I hope we don't get into a lot of conflicts with the requesting agencies in situations like that. And I don't know how much it comes up or if it comes up a lot, but in any event, I appreciate the answer. I guess I'll jump to Division 77 because there's some relationship there. I am concerned, and I understand why you guys decided that a lot of the comments about reconciling the process of regular applications and in-stream applications or in-stream transfers or in-stream leases versus regular transfers. I understand that you felt like that was outside the scope of this rulemaking. I think it's really important that we put that on the list because the statute does say that in-stream rights are water rights, just like every other water right, and they should be treated the same as every other water right. And it does seem like there's a far more detailed process. I mean, there is a far more detailed process in the Division 77 rules. I hear you saying that you go through some of that same analysis on other applications and other transfers or transactions as well. But in the interest of kind of having our rules be as crystal clear as possible in the future, I would really like to get those get those processes reconciled and make sure that we're not putting extra burdens on in-stream rights, because I suspect that there is some of that. I mean, when I was involved with the Oregon Water Trust many years ago, requesting the first converted in-stream rights, we definitely ran up against issues where out-of-stream rights were treated differently than in-stream rights. So I think that's something we still need to work on. I guess I'll leave it at that. And then this second comment on Division 77 kind of relates to the consent to injury as well. I guess I don't fully understand why why Water Resources has its own EANF process that is different than the agencies who are applying or requesting in-stream water rights. I mean, if they have their own rules that identify the methodology for how much they request, I would think that we would want to defer to those. I mean, obviously, all of the applications can still be protested and go through, proof and everything else. But that seems to me like a funny place for Water Resources to insert ourselves. And I'd just like to know why that is.
I can help with this one. That works. So thank you, Commissioner Newman. For the record, Katie Ratcliffe. And a lot of the comments appeared to assert that we didn't have statutory authority to have the limitation imposed by ENAF that is in the existing Division 77 rules. And when we did our evaluation, and I can take a moment and find the site, and we also have that in the tracker. But we believe that we do have the statutory authority for the director to impose that limitation specifically for state agency requested in-stream water right applications, but not for in-stream leases, in-stream transfers, or allocation of conserved water. So that's why we split it out. So on the basis alone of do we or don't we have statutory authority, we believe that we do, and that therefore ENAF shouldn't be removed as a restriction for in-stream water right applications requested by state agencies strictly based on an interpretation of statute. However, at some point, the commission did put ENAF limitations into Division 77. The commission could ultimately at some point decide to remove ENAF as a limitation. We haven't asked for, I don't know that we've asked for advice about this, but I think, from an initial assessment that the commission could elect to remove the ENAF limitation. We would still have the statutory ability for the director to decide that a lesser amount than is being requested for that public use is appropriate. And so it would be, a little more open-ended than the commission currently has it through our rules. So the commission said, okay, basically this is how you do it. Statute says the director can limit. Division 77 says, here's how you do it. The commission could decide they want that to be more open-ended, or they want a different way for us to look at it.
Okay, thank you. And I do see the statutory site in the tracker, so that's helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner Newman, might I follow up on your prior comments? Because I do think there's just a piece that's important for us to note on the record here, but I don't want to distract you is that okay?
I keep muting myself because I have a whiny dog right behind me. So I'm sorry. But no, go ahead.
So just going back to the question on consent to injury, it is in 540-530 subsection 1, and it is under 1C specifically. And it does say the Water Resources Department may consent to the change only upon a recommendation that the department do so from the agency that requested the in-stream water right. So I just want to note that that is what's in statute there. And so it says the department's the one doing it, but that's where that recommendation comes from. And that also addresses your concerns around coordination. So Lisa, is that consistent? Okay, she's shaking her head. Yes, great.
Could I make one quick comment about that?
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Lee.
Oh, sure. I was lobbying on water issues when that statute was passed. I think it was 1987 or around that time. And this is an issue that allowed the bill to go forward. Everyone was concerned that the department would have that final decision making. So that's one thing I might point out.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Okay, any other comments on this particular topic? Otherwise, we can move forward with some more questions. I think Commissioner Newman has a couple more.
I'm sorry, I don't want to
Not at all. Not at all.
monopolize.
This is important, and it may be a question that others of us have. So go ahead.
I think we can go, given those things, I think we can go to Division 2. I think that, this is a hard one. I mean, it's a really hard one to try to accomplish what the legislature told us to do. They told the department to put together a default schedule. I have one big concern about the default schedule, and this is based in part on experiences when I was dealing with contested cases as a practitioner. The issues list, the 28 days of the 180-day schedule dedicated to the issues list. And I know that that won't always be necessary, but that does seem like a problem to me because I know the legislation tried to make the protest more detailed and specific, and so that should help. But there will still be lots of protests presumably filed not by lawyers and the agency, as you said in the tracker, you want to be able to say, well, that issue is not going to the contested case because, so that you've got some screening over what's in the protest. I feel like that's a long time to try to sort out the issues. And then the other thing, I think there's a potential for, the discovery period has been compressed as we were directed. I don't have any problem with eliminating requests for admissions. I think providing the file up front is going to help with a number of things. The interrogatories, 10, 20, no subparts, that too should be addressed to some degree by having the file up front because you should have the names of all the people who worked on the application. A lot of the issues should come out of that. But there's very little time built in to process the discovery that you get. There's not very much time built in for motions for summary determination. Those can take a lot of time. I'm not sure I have a solution here because we've got the outer bookends of the time period that we're supposed to deal with. But I am concerned about that initial issues discussion and whether we've got the balance struck correctly for the discovery and motion practice in the middle. And let me just, the other big issue in that one, of course, is the request for production of documents switching over to a FOIA or a public records request if it takes more than 30 hours. Maybe we just need to try that. I don't know. I think we're going to have to keep track of, is that hurting nonprofits because they're going to end up paying, for the public records requests where they wouldn't have been paying for discovery? Is the provision of the file up front going to take care, and the additional detail required in the protest, is that going to help such that there aren't big requests for production of documents that need to be done? I think the other thing that we need to attend to, and I realize this is like a separate issue of IT staffing and budgeting and so forth, but I think if the department had a computer system, which many private law firms do, where every time you write an email, the system prompts you to say, where do I file this? If that sort of thing happened so that when you provide the file at the beginning of a case, it's pretty much got all that stuff that you are often trying to find with a public records request by saying, anybody who talked to anybody who talked to anybody else on any time, please tell us about. I think we need to pay attention to the internal processes to make those things work. So I'll just leave it at that. I don't have a solution. I have concerns.
Commissioner Newman, I think you touched on a lot there. So I will see if Jesse or Will Davidson would like to touch on the default schedule and your comments there. And in terms of I'm seeing if they're still in the room. I think they are, but I do want to note that we have identified the similar issue as you have related to our current email system, and don't have a solution, but we certainly are talking about how much it complicates the work that we're doing when public records requests are generating thousands of emails, duplicates, not able to necessarily easily pull that information together. So we fully understand that one, and don't have a solution at the moment, but it is on our list of issues we need to solve at some point in time. And whether we'll have the financial resources to do so, I think will be a question mark, because as you ought to know, lots of these things come with or require money. So we do have it on the list though. So I'm not seeing it. It's just here.
Yeah.
Will there? There we go.
Yeah. So yeah, for the record, members of the commission, this is Jesse Ratcliffe. I'm happy to take a first crack, and then if Will wants to add anything, and I apologize, I'm also one of the crew here that has been fighting off whatever's been going around, so hopefully my voice will hold out. So the default schedule was the product of a fair amount of back and forth with the Office of Administrative Hearings. We have the 180 days that we're working to, and the need for that default schedule to include all the potential steps that we could encounter in a contested case process. In many contested cases, we don't encounter all of those steps, and so time can be made up as a result of that. I know there was a feeling on the part of the OAH that there needed to be a certain amount of time built in for the issues list issues that could arise. And we tried to set up a process where there's going to be outreach by the department prior to referral, where the department is identifying the issues, and hopefully if there is an immediate reaction from a party to say, we think you got it wrong, our protest said X, you framed it as Y, you messed up, that we'll have an ability to talk with those folks and in an ideal world reach resolution on how the issue ought to be framed before it reaches the OAH. That said, because we are kind of trying to, plan for worst case scenarios, I think there was a feeling that there did need to be this time built in. I've worked on hearings that have had a wide range of links. In some cases, the Department of Justice in this case is responding to issues that are really highly time sensitive. There are some instances in which cases are required to go to hearing within 20 days. And when that's the case, we do the best we can, and try to provide process within that time frame. And so I feel like the 180-day time frame in some instances is going to be a challenge. We're going to need to work with the parties to be efficient. But I also feel like it's something that in the majority of cases is going to be doable based on my experience. This is also going to be a learning process, as I think you alluded to for everyone. And so we'll get in there and be able to see how this is working. And if adjustments need to be made, the statute does allow for one or more default schedules to be adopted, and it could be that we're back at some point saying we've encountered a different class of cases that needs a different look.
And Jesse, if I might add, we don't necessarily have to come back to the commission for that. We did include in the rules that we can work with OAH to come up with other default schedules. We did have a conversation when we were reviewing all the comments on this about, well, should we try to draft up another alternate schedule that the commission could adopt? The concern we had with doing that is we really did get very valuable input from the various interested parties, and to develop another schedule in a vacuum, given where we were at in the process, didn't feel right. So we really wanted to be, if we develop another alternate schedule, the rule does provide that we can do that in consultation with OAH. And so these other scenarios that may come up where everybody agrees on the issues list, great. We don't need to include that in that default schedule. Maybe they agree we're not doing motions for summary determination, great. That will free up the schedule. And if we can have, ideally in my mind, we'd have multiple default schedules depending on the scenario, so then people know what to expect and you don't have to spend time on that. I think that would be a great outcome. We just, in the scope of this rulemaking, one, didn't have the time, felt uncomfortable not consulting with folks on that. And really, I think the goal here was to get, I don't know if worst case scenario, but the most processed, right, situation on the books, so people know if you do all of these things, this is what it's going to look like for that 180 days. And so that, I think, was kind of our approach with this one. Jesse, Will, do you have anything to add to that? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, Raquel, and Will. Commissioner Mall, did you have something on this same topic that you wanted to chime in on, or did you have another question for a different topic?
No, it was on this topic, and it was actually back to Commissioner Newman. I was just curious, Jan, given your experience, if because I don't have it, but my observation are two. One, I get the sense that a lot of the timelines that we're dealing with are still from the old days of when snail mail and paper was fundamental, and I'm not really sure if we've adjusted to that even today with 180 days and such. So my question to you is, maybe it's a proposition question. Is this kind of not like building new highways where if you add another lane, they're just going to fill it up? And so regardless of what time frame within reason you give to applicants and protestants, that people will adjust, and that if you do give longer terms, they're going to use it. I mean, it certainly seems that way given the timeliness with which things are filed, usually the last day, at least in my experience on the commission. Is that how does that mix with your experience?
Jesse may want to respond to that. I mean, I think there's some truth in that, and part of the problem, of course, is that people who are doing these contested cases have all kinds of other, trials and motion practice and everything else going on too. So they've got this timeline imposed or juxtaposed against all these other timelines. So it's gonna be tricky, but I think people certainly will try to adapt. And I think there's always going to be an incentive for one party or the other, maybe, to drag the time out. It's not always going to be the same party necessarily, but I mean, 180 days is fast. So, and the other thing I didn't mention before, the site visit, I kind of agree with some of the comments that having one party be able to veto a site visit is not a great thing. On the other hand, fitting it in is just one more, problem, or fitting in a request and objections and a ruling on it. So maybe we just have to try this and see what happens. And like Raquel says, there's opportunity to develop a couple of other types of schedules, and hopefully the protests will be more specific, but I don't know about that. So I can't say I won't support it this way. But I'm just a little worried about whether it's going to work, and we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think given the evidence and the direction from the legislature, the evidence being, the ad hoc, the experience that I've had here and in other places, that this is going to take some collective training and discipline, and I feel like we have to move in this direction. So I'm supportive of it.
Can I say one other thing there? The other thing that, I mean, it's not in rules, but we've got to train the judges, the administrative law judges. We've got to get a batch of ALJs who know water stuff, because that'll help tremendously as well. They really slow things down when they don't know the water area.
There was this great
So many of them don't, because they're employment law judges 90% of the time. But
how do we go about doing that, you think?
There was this great
That's the
paper, I
question.
think, 2 winters ago, submitted by 4 eminent attorneys with that. I think we should go back and refer to that.
Commissioners, I appreciate you bringing that up. I will tell you, we have been having conversations. Well, so these are, we've been having conversations with OAH as well as with the state courts, and we've heard loud and clear the interest in ensuring that we have folks that are trained up on these issues. And I will say both OAH and the state courts have been great to work with. When you go into a meeting and they know about the Dividing the Waters program, which is okay, see, I'm getting a heads up there, or a thumbs up on that one, which is one of the, well, Commissioner Newman probably knows it better than I do, but it is basically professional, I don't know if they're a coalition that, or membership group that essentially does trainings on water judicial issues. And so it really is a unique program, and both OAH and the state courts are familiar with it. And so we really appreciate that. And I don't know if Jesse, you have anything to add. I've spent a little more time talking with the state courts just about what we've been hearing, you know, in terms of this interest. But I'm curious if you have anything to add on that front in terms of OAH.
Yeah, so I know it's been a point of emphasis for them. And one thing I will say is that in the past few years, we're seeing the same group of people over and over again. And so they are people who are gaining more experience, and particularly to address the protest backlog as we're referring more cases, they're having more opportunity to, you know, to hear cases. And so they're building skills that way. I think from my perspective, like part of the thing is just making sure that this is a continuing point of emphasis. You know, people leave, they retire, you know, this is always going to be a small fraction of the judges involved with the OAH, because commissioners, you point out, most of them are employment focused administrative law judges. So we're always working with a batch of a half dozen maybe or so. And as you lose folks, it's important to make sure that the new ones that are coming in, you know, get those trainings and opportunities so that they can keep up on it. I think one of the big challenges in water cases is frankly just getting the attention and the time that the cases warrant. And, you know, that's a struggle always for both the state court system and the OAH when they've got a lot on their docket. And so just, you know, the more we can drive home the point that a lot of times these issues are quite complicated and deserve that time, that goes a long way.
Thank you. Thank you, Jesse. Okay, Commissioner Newman, did you have anything else that you wanted to bring up?
I think I have pretty much gone through my list. I mean,
Okay.
I may
It was
have, I may
good.
want to say more after other people talk, but
No,
I had a list and I am at the end of it. So
okay. Well, appreciate you bringing those topics and those concerns up. Do we have any other comments from commissioners? Okay. Well, let's just pause for a second. And this is a lot in front of us. Our next step then would be to make a motion. If there are not any further discussion or questions or anything left from staff that they wanted to finish up with, Raquel, I don't know if anybody on staff has anything else to comment on before we move into talking about motions.
Commissioners, I just wanted to thank you all for your engagement, and I know you all were reviewing all of the documents that were prepared, so we always appreciate your engagement and thoughtfulness on these issues, and just appreciate the time here that you all have put into this, because we've read the documents and we know that it took a while to read the documents, so we really do appreciate that, and the great questions. I also appreciate you all pushing us to make sure that we're tracking these issues. I think Commissioner Wolf and Commissioner Newman brought up some items to make sure we continue to evaluate as we go through this process. So I've made notes of, if you saw me writing away, I was making notes that we need to track some of these items. So again, appreciate the Commission's diligence on this. And so, oh, you've disappeared. There you are, Commissioner Smitherman. If I'll just note, we can pull up the prior motion that was the director's alternative, if that is helpful to you. I don't want to presume that that's where you all are going to go. And so if you all would like to request that we pull that up, if that is where you intend to go, We are happy to pull it up for your convenience because we know it's a complicated motion. So
Yes, it is. I think it would be a good idea to go ahead and put it up on the screen. And again, I want to reiterate thanks to staff for all the work in this. I also wanted to mention how grateful we are to the RAC for all of their dedication to this large rulemaking, this large change to the rules, and their thoughtful comments and dialogue related to these rules. We also appreciate public comment that came in as well. There was a lot of public comment from around the state, very thoughtful in their comments, and a lot of water professionals, people that work in this industry, and they spent a lot of time reading through these rules and providing comments on it as well. And I thank the staff for going through each comment one by one in detail and making changes that seemed necessary based on the comments that you received. So again, appreciate all the time that's gone into all of this work. And with that, I will entertain a motion.
Chair, I'd be happy to read this if that's what it takes.
That's what it takes.
Then I move to adopt the proposed Division 2, 14, 17, 18, 77, 300, 305, 310, 315, 325, 340, 380, and 382 rules in attachments 6A and 6B with the following modifications. For OAR 690-305-0010, subsection 2, subsection A, and subsection 2, subsection C, replace, quote, be equal to or greater than, end quote, with, quote, exceed, end quote. And for OAR 690-380-4000, subsection 3, subsection D, replace, quote, full amount of water allowed under, end quote, with, quote, portion of, end quote, and add, quote, to be transferred, end quote, after, quote, right, end quote.
Second.
Hey, thank you. Good job, Joe. Commissioner Mall, appreciate that. And we have a motion and we have a second. And so I will go through commissioners to make their vote. I'll start with Commissioner Chiara,
Yes.
Commissioner Newman,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes.
Commissioner Mall,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. So motion passes. Thank you again to staff. Okay, it's now time. I believe we're a little ahead of time, but I believe we can just go into our public comment period. So we have a couple of people who have joined us online. Let me just grab that. First up, we have Amanda Beatty. If you're here.
Vice Chair Smitherman, we are not seeing that person's name in the attendance list.
Okay. How about next up, we have James Fraser.
He's there.
He's joining as a panelist.
Yes.
There he is. James, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair Smitherman, members of the Commission, and Director Gall. My name is James Fraser, and I'm the Oregon Policy Director at Trout Unlimited. TU is a nonprofit dedicated to conserving cold water fish, such as trout, salmon, and steelhead in their habitats. We have more than 350,000 members and supporters nationwide, including many members in Oregon. We also have about 20 full-time staff in the state, most of whom are project managers that spend their days restoring fish passage, addressing fish habitat issues, and working collaboratively with water right holders to lease and transfer water and stream to benefit native species and communities. Our largest offices in the state are in Northeast Oregon, Klamath Falls, and the Tillamook Bay area. I'd like to use my time today to raise the importance of monitoring and enforcing in-stream water rights this summer and to respectfully request that the department prioritize and set aside necessary staff time to make sure that in-stream water rights, some of which are quite senior, are protected. As you all know, it's been a very tough winter on Oregon snowpack. For instance, my family spent the weekend on Mount Hood, and the ground was dry and snow-free at 4,000 feet of elevation. Accordingly, it's reasonably foreseeable that many Oregon streams will drop to very low and warm conditions this summer, and likely earlier in the year than we typically see late season or low flow conditions. That's a scary proposition. Lower, warmer, earlier. This raises the importance of department staff monitoring and enforcing in-stream water rights this year in particular. Certainly, the department and its water masters have done this well in places over the years, which shows that it can be achieved in 2026 too. But it's going to look different and likely need closer attention in 2026. For instance, there may be streams and in-stream water rights needing enforcement that haven't generally needed it in the past. There may be water right holders regulated off who haven't generally been regulated in the past. Some of Oregon's in-stream water rights are quite senior, whether they derive from past in-stream transfers or even some of the state's early in-stream water right applications, and they will require calls and regulation this year. The department's water masters know these places and know the streams where this may come to a head in 2026. Trout Unlimited asks that you give the direction, support, and capacity to WRD's water masters so that they can focus on this and afford it the appropriate time during the upcoming busy field season. Oregon's in-stream water rights and the values afforded by them to fish, wildlife, recreational users, environmental quality, and other sectors only provide benefits if they're monitored and carefully enforced as part of the priority system. We appreciate your attention to this matter as well as the department's field service folks who have their work cut out for them this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, James. I think we can all echo your concerns with the state of water supply this year and the lack of snowpack and precipitation. So thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. I believe I could get a nod from staff. Do we have anyone else who has signed up for public comment?
Commissioner Smotherman, I'm seeing nods no.
Okay.
And I just want to acknowledge, although our director stepped out, I want to acknowledge James's comments that I heard them, I wrote them down, and I will follow up with our Field Services Division Administrator to make sure that she has also heard them. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you. So with that, we do not have any more public comments. I would like to say a thank you to Commissioner Mall. This is his final commission meeting. He now has his hand up, so I have a feeling he wants to say a few words. But we're just so grateful for your dedication and staying on the commission as long as you have to help move things forward. All of your wisdom has been greatly appreciated, and we will miss you. But thank you for your service. Did you want to say something?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just been a joy. It's been a pleasure. Wisdom's never really associated with me, so I'm not sure I pulled that one out.
Take it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, on my way out the door, given two of the things that were brought up in this last discussion, I think back to the momentum that was generated when the commission, I think, directed staff. I can't remember how formally it was to dig in on the groundwater issue that took years, but led to some significant changes in how groundwater is being managed. And I do think that it's hard to say how impactful it will be, but this question about the expansion or not, the amendment of the enlargement definition on one hand, and I'm blanking on the other. Oh, the land use piece. Sorry, how could I forget that? The integration of land use things. I do think that those are going to be easy to sort of kind of make second tier. Yeah, we'll get to that when we get to it because we're so busy with other sorts of things going on. But if possible, I would love to direct staff to really stick with the people that have commented and engaged on both of those issues in this rulemaking, such that by the June commission meeting, you would at least get an update to the commission, and then by the September commission meeting, have some sort of resolution, either recognition that, yeah, we talked internally and staff practice is changing and here's how we're handling it, or we need to deal with this through rule. Maybe that's not as applicable for the land use stuff, but I just want to encourage Godspeed on that thing, on both of those, because those are the kind of critical issues that I think the commission can weigh in on productively and encourage and support. So thanks all. I look forward to seeing you out in the world, down here, hopefully up here in the Upper Willamette Basin sometime soon.
We look forward to visiting you too, and thank you. Thank you, Joe. Well, this concludes our March 19th Oregon Water Resources Commission meeting, and we are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kudos, Joe.
Thank you.
See you, Joe.
Reach out as you can.
Come ride a train sometime.
Okay.
Come ride the train, right?
Bye.
Thank you, Joe. Bye. Thank you, Julie.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. See you soon.
All righty.
Till June.
Till June.
We stopped the recording.